normally start this meeting without a microphone because I talk pretty loudly to begin with, but I was assured that I was supposed to. I guess that seems more professional or something, but welcome this afternoon to the final book discussion for 2021. And if I haven't met you before, my name is Marcia Schultz, and I am now, for the next 10 months, I think, the chairman of the Friends of the Library. And in that capacity, one of the things that we love doing the most, I think, is offering to Robson 4 different book reviews during the year. And I will say that we were just presented from the current book discussion committee 4 titles that will be reviewed this next year. I'm not going to say what all of them are, because that just leaves you wondering a little bit more, and you just have to keep coming back to find out. But I will tell you that the next one we will be discussing will be in February, and it is going to be All Quiet on the Western Front. So I think the group, or I will defer to you, LaDonna. Would you like to share the other 3 titles now?
No, I can go to wait and leave everybody to suspense.
Okay. Let me just put it this way. I think they're all going to be great. I think this committee did an excellent job of their selection, and I am super excited about one in particular that has just recently been released. And so maybe you can now just kind of piddle around and try to figure out what book it is that I'm saying. And it will probably come, my guess is, we're suggesting that it be the last one of the year next fall, so that everyone will have ample time to read it. But anyhow, with that hanging over your head just like the carrot, I will move on and introduce the book that we will be reviewing today. I'm getting ready to. Thank you, Klaus. As a member, one of the ways that we support our library, and most of you know this, is that the Friends of the Library is a completely volunteer group that was started a few years ago, and it was for the specific purpose of raising funds for the library, to support our library. You may have noticed that we just recently have designated $3,400 that we are giving, or have promised already, to the library board for additional shelving, which we were desperately in need of so that we can bring in more books, as well as 3 new computers and Microsoft Office Works to be on all 3 computers. Yay, yes, thank you. All those computers, by the way, will continue to have the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and the Denton Record Chronicle. So if you do not subscribe to a newspaper, you've got several to choose from. If you are interested in joining the Friends of the Library, you can see the man with the cap over there next to the man without a cap on. And one of them would be more than happy to take your name in the $10 dues for this year. The dues will run until the end of June next year, at which time we will have a membership enrollment again for the following year. We are also, and I hate to keep droning on because I'm ready to start the book review, but I will mention that we are going to be introducing a fundraising campaign this next month. It will be described in the Pioneer Press, but we are asking people to consider donating money to the library to buy books. That's it, just books. The money's not going to shelving, pencils, paper, anything, just books. And we are going to try to get a lot of the newest books that are out so that perhaps you won't have to fight for it online from libraries. And the way you're going to do this is, if you so choose, you can say, I'd like to donate X amount to the Friends of the Library, and I'd like this to be in the memory of, or in celebration of the life of, or just say it's an anonymous donation. But this money will all go to a fund. We will acknowledge this tax deductible donation back to you, so you have it for your tax records. And we will, if you designate someone that you are honoring or recognizing, we are going to have book plates made for the inside of the book. And then we are going to select a table or a shelf specifically, hopefully, to showcase the plethora of books that we're going to look for. So I hope that you will all take place in this and think of this as a holiday gift in lieu of something that we'll never get here because it's in a shipping container in the Pacific as I speak. You can do this. We will go to Barnes & Noble or somewhere, and by golly, we'll have books on the shelf for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever the occasion might be. So, with no further ado, I would like to introduce our panel today. These people are all friends of mine. They are wonderful residents here at Robson. I think we are blessed to have so many good speakers. And I'm going to start with the gentleman to my left. This is Klaus Dannenberg, and Klaus was the person who was, he along with, I think, Linda in the back, Bono. I always say Bono, I know it's played Bono. I get you confused with some rock group, but Klaus was instrumental in starting the Friends of the Library. And he was, I believe, the first chairman of the Friends of the Library. And couldn't get out of it, and we just can't get rid of him like a bad penny. That's not a pun, the author's name is Louise Penny today. But Klaus is going to be one of our facilitators today. And then to my right, on the far end, I have Dawn Schieg. And Dawn, I first met doing pottery out here and found out that she had a love of many things, including reading, just as I do. So she will be certainly talking all about this book, as well as Joan Pursley to my immediate right. And Joan and I are in several organizations out here together, but Joan is also on that committee along with LaDonna and Diane, and I'm looking to see. Who? Oh, Louis Tolan and Lynn Moore and Mike Hall, thank you very much, are not here today, but they all are on the committee. And so don't try to weasel out those titles now from Joan while she's up here. But anyhow, I would ask for you all to just give a round of applause in advance for our presenters today. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. It would be a shock to all if I could get through something without forgetting something. Typically, after the book presentation, book review, whatever you want to call it, several people, along with some of our presenters, sometimes meet over in the boardroom at the grill for a little adult beverage or non-adult beverage, and then discuss the finer points of reading and discussion. So after that, after this, we hope that you will join all of us. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be there because I have a commitment this afternoon, but I know that it will be delightful, so don't forget that. And one other thing, if you're not a member of Friends of the Library, did I say this already? Thank you. The two gentlemen over there, I couldn't remember. Thank you.
How many of you have read the book?
Well,
Okay. How many of you liked the book? Good. How many of you saw the movie? I haven't seen it, and I'm kind of feeling like I don't want to see it. Okay, thank you. I don't know how much you know about Louise Penny, but I kind of been researching her and reading interviews about her and with her, and an article that her agent wrote, and she's a very interesting woman. She was born in Toronto in 1958, and she said, and I quote, "I came out of the womb afraid." She said she was afraid of other children, afraid of heights, afraid of the night, afraid of breaking her nose. Name something, she said, and I was afraid of it. And her punishment as a child was being forced to go outside and play. How many of you would have liked that punishment? And her favorite activity was reading alone in her room. And when she discovered Agatha Christie, she developed a lifelong interest in what she calls crime fiction. She earned a Bachelor of Applied Arts degree at Ryerson University, and the Applied Arts in Canada is a radio and television degree. And then she went and worked for 18 years as a radio journalist with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. She worked in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Thunder Bay, Ontario, Montreal, and Quebec City. She covered what's called hard news. She covered gang activity, crime, drug wars, and some politics. I guess if it was nasty, she got it. And her assignments, her cities that she worked in, she didn't know people. She had left her friends from Toronto, and she was very lonely. She also still had this terrible fear, these irrational fears of things. She suffered with anxiety, and she turned to alcohol, she turned to drink, and she was an alcoholic for about 14 years. And when she was 35, she considered suicide. She somehow got into AA, and she became sober, and she said her greatest achievement in life was gaining sobriety. She said about that time, she said, "I had developed an unhealthy worldview, which was that the world is a scary place filled with people who want to or are capable of doing harm. I know what it's like to hate yourself so much that you have to murder yourself. Coming out on the other side gave me profound belief that goodness exists." And that's a theme that I think you see through all of her books. After a year of sobriety, she was set up with a blind date with a man named Michael Whitehead, who was the head of the hematology department at Montreal Children's Hospital, and also 25 years older than she. The two of them fell in love and married. She had wanted to write from the time she was 8 years old, but she had been forced to work and make a living and support herself. But once she married Michael, he supported her and he encouraged her to write. And she was able to quit her job, and she was determined to write the Pulitzer Prize-winning piece of literature. Unfortunately, she had writer's block for 5 years. Her goals were so great that she couldn't put pen to paper. She finally, one day, was looking at her nightstand and saw her pile of mysteries and crime books, and she thought, I've got to write what I enjoy. Why am I trying to write something that I wouldn't read myself? And about that time, she and her husband also moved out into the country near an artist community, and she also found inspiration there. She said to write what she loved to read, she drew on her personal observations as well as the incidents from her radio days. And one of the central mysteries of what's her book, Still Alive, was the woman who wouldn't let anyone in her house. And actually that story came out of a story that Penny covered when she lived in Quebec about a woman who wouldn't let people into her living room. She said, "Most of my writing is based on something real. I like to think of it as a kind of homage to or inspiration, though other people might consider it stealing. I consider myself a kind of Dr. Frankenstein, but in a good way. I take an arm here and a leg there and a head there, and I cobble together all these vital organs from other people and their experiences. She also said that none of her characters have ever had an emotion that she hasn't personally experienced. Still Life was rejected by 50 publishers. She started out sending to well-known publishers, people who published authors that she enjoyed. They turned her down. She finally, the last publisher she sent a book to was a very small Canadian publisher, and they turned it down, and she thought, you know, that's it. And then she found out that her book, Still Life, had been shortlisted for the Debut Dagger Award, which was presented by the Crime Writers Association of Great Britain. And her book did not win, but it came in second out of 800. And she went over for the award ceremony, and she thought maybe she could get an agent over there. Maybe if she had an agent, she could get a publisher. No agents were at this event. So despondent, she went to a fundraiser in North London, and she said this very funny thing. She said she happened upon a beautiful blue scarf. She said, I went to pick it up and soon found myself in a violent tug of war with a British woman who had her claws in it. Who are you? She asked indignantly. And who are you? The woman barked back. When the other woman uttered her name, Teresa Chris, Louise Penny realized this was an influential agent for writers of fiction. She said, I let go of the scarf immediately. She said, in fact, I think I may have bought it for her. At any rate, Miss Chris took her book and got a publisher for it. And it was published in the UK and Canada in 2005 and in the US in 2006. It won the British New Blood Dagger, Canada's Arthur Ellis Award for Best First Novel, the US Dillis Award from the Independent Booksellers Association, and it made the Kirkus Review Top 10 Mysteries list for 2006. She's now written 18 books. You have the list of them. More than 10 million of her books have sold in North America, and they've been translated into 29 languages. She almost stopped writing. When her husband got sick, he developed dementia. She thought about quitting writing to take care of him. And she said, but writing became a safe haven. She said, when someone around you has dementia, you're always on the verge of chaos. I think writing saved my sanity. And then after Michael died, because of that, I was able to carry on. And she said, and now Michael's immortal. I get to visit him all the time. It's because Gamache is based partly on her husband. I'd like to read just a few more quotes from her that I found enjoyable. She said, when I started my novel, I knew the chances of being published were minuscule, so I thought the writing of it has to be enough. I knew I needed to write a book that I really enjoy writing, with characters I would choose as friends, in a community I would choose to live in. Her detective, Armand Gamache, had to be worth spending time with too. At first, she said he was going to be a closet coke fiend, a tortured guy. But she said, then I thought, I don't want to go down to breakfast every morning and climb into his head. So I created someone who is kindly and strong, and has integrity, and isn't a bully, and has a sense of humor, and is literate without being pompous, and loves his food. Someone not unlike my husband. She also said, writing about murder doesn't interest me. Murder is a terrible act, but that's all it is. What it allows me to do is express emotion and themes, ideas and philosophies. I'm interested in what characters do and how they struggle. And lastly, the quote from the Auden's Elegy to Herman Melville, which is also in the book. Goodness existed. That was the new knowledge. His terror had to blow itself quite out to let him see. Sort of like she had to go through her alcoholism and finally gain sobriety to overcome all her fears and to realize that the world wasn't a horrible place.
A little discussion of characters. The regulars, the ones that show up in all the 16 books or 18 books. Yeah. First off, there's Chief Inspector Armand Gamache. He's the Chief Inspector of the Quebec Surete. And his number 2, his deputy, was Inspector Jean-Guy Beauvoir. And he's a funny character. He has a lot of evolution, through the books. He changes a lot. I won't tell you where he winds up eventually. And then Gamache's latest protege. He has a protege in every book. Sometimes the same protege goes through a couple of books, but usually it's been one book and then they either get promoted or they become a bad person or they disappear somehow or another. The regulars and the villagers, the village is 3 Pines, and Don will tell you about 3 Pines in a minute. You'll notice Joan has 3 Pines on her table. Those are not mistaken Christmas decorations. That's to remind you about where we are, when the book takes place. And it takes place, it's at 3 Pines is in essentially every book. They have a couple of books that are other places, but usually it's in 3 Pines. And the regulars, there's Clara and Peter Morrow. They're painters and have a lot of different characteristics of painting. My wife is a painter and an artist, so I know about painters. Olivier Brulé and Gabri, short for Gabriel, Dubois, and they're the gay innkeepers, and they're funny. And they show up in every one of the books. And then one of the really bizarre characters is Ruth Zardo, and she is foul-mouthed. She's always swearing, and she's also the village's conscience. She's also a poet. She's a well-known, well-respected poet, and some of her poetry shows up in the books. And then there's Myrna Landers, and Myrna is a black psychologist who came to 3 Pines to live an easier, more relaxed lifestyle. And she started a bookstore, a used bookstore. I know people that have owned used bookstores, and she has a lot of those same characteristics. So those are the ones that go through this book, go through almost all the books. And then in subsequent mysteries, there's new characters. Gamache has new proteges, and each of them have different challenges, different skills, and that's the interaction is a large part of the book. And then new, and I say often surprising, villains. Some of the villains you wouldn't expect are going to turn out to be villains. Some of the people that you read about in this book, the first one, Still Life, are going to be villains in later books, surprisingly enough. And to me, I was telling some people that, to me, Still Life was not the best of the series. It's kind of a so-so book, but I still recommend, if you haven't started them, start with that one because you'll want to know the characters. There's a theme that goes throughout all the books, several themes that go throughout all the books, and the villagers and the village is a big part of that theme. So let's talk about the setting, and let Don talk about the setting.
Thank you. I came into this presentation never having heard of Louise Penny, never having read her books, and so I started with Still Life. I decided not to read, learning about a new author for me is like opening a gift, and I decided to not read any more of her work until after this meeting. I wanted to bring the gift newly open and starting to be explored. And I found 2 major things in this as part of this, was getting into this book was slow. It took up to page 46 to get to a physical description of the setting. Another thing that I found was the small town interaction among friends of daily actions, knowing each other's stories, and this colors the outcome. I feel it's easy to get caught up in the action while missing the clues left hidden in plain sight. And so as I started looking for the theme, for the setting, I kind of after, of course, the murder in the woods, we start back with Gamache in Montreal, and he's leaving Montreal into the flat farmlands around Montreal, close in and becoming slowly rolling hills, even larger mountains covered with brilliant autumn leaves. About 20 minutes after turning off the Eastern Township auto route, you pass a small park-marked sign telling them that 3 Pines was 2 kilometers off this secondary road. And after a tooth-jarring minute or 2 along the washboard dirt road, they saw the inevitable paradox. An old stone mill sat beside a pond, and mid-morning sun warming its fieldstones, and around it the maples and birches and wild cherry trees held their fragile leaves like 1,000 happy hands waving to them upon arrival, and police cars, the snakes in Eden. Gamache knew the police were not the evil ones. The snake was already there. As Gamache walked towards these people, he could see down the road as it dipped gently, sloping into the picturesque village. And after he was there with the people, he went down into that village, and Gamache sat on the bench, and this is on page 46. I mean, we took all the way to get to here. I like to read my books fast. You know, like one night, I stayed up till 4 or 5 o'clock until it's finished. And page 46 to get into the setting was a little slow for me. He sat on the bench watching the birds, but mostly watching the village. Before his eyes, the village of 3 pines seemed to slow right down. The insistence of life, the bustle and the energy became muffled. 3 huge pines faced him at the far end of the green, and between him and them was a pond. A bunch of sweater-clad children chasing after frogs, apparently. He supposed, anyway. The village green sat, not surprisingly, in the center of the village. A road called the Commons, circling it with homes, except for behind him. Behind him seemed to be the commercial district, and it was a very short commercial. It consisted, as far as Gamache could see, of a bakery, a general store, a bistro, and a bookstore. And 4 roads left off of the Commons, like spokes on a wheel, or the directions of a compass. And as he sat quietly in the village as it happened around him, he was impressed with how beautiful it was. These old homes facing the green with their mature perennial gardens of trees. By how natural everything looked, undesigned, and the pall of grief that settled in on this little community, worn with dignity and sadness and a certain familiarity. This village was old, and you don't get to be old without knowing grief and loss. Ben comes and sits down beside him, and as they sit there silently for a minute or two, and then, that's Jane's home over there, Ben pointing to a small stone cottage to the left, and that place beside it belongs to Peter and Clara. Gamache shifted his gaze. Their home was slightly larger than Jane's, while hers was made of fieldstone, theirs was red brick, in the style known as Loyalist. A simple wooden veranda ran along the front of the home and held 2 wicker rocking chairs. A front door was flanked by windows, and upstairs you could see 2 more windows with shutters painted a warm, deep blue. The pretty front garden was planted with roses and perennials and fruit trees. Probably crabapple, thought Gamache. A stand of trees, mostly maple, separated Jane Neal and the Morrows, though more than the trees separated them now. My place is over there, Ben nodded at a charming old white clapboard house with a veranda below and 3 dormers above. But I guess that place up there is also mine, as he looked up towards the sky. And Gamache looked up there and then kind of had to scan down the hill, and there stood a Victorian monstrosity. Is the village named after those trees, Gamache asked as he looked at the cluster of the greens? You don't know the story? They're only 60 years old. Those trees are not the originals. My mother helped plant them when she was a kid, but there have been pines here in this village since it was founded over 200 years ago, and always in a group of 3 pines. But why, said Gamache as he leaned forward. It's a code for the United Empire Loyalists. They settled all the land around here except for the Abenaki, of course. But we've only a couple of kilometers from the border of the states, and when people loyal to the crown during and after the War of Independence were fleeing, they had no way of knowing where they were safe. So code was designed. 3 pines in a cluster meant the Loyalists are welcome. So elegant, so simple, said Gamache, and he was genuinely impressed. But why haven't I heard of this before? I'm a student of Quebec history, and yet this is completely unknown to me. Perhaps the English want to keep it a secret in case we need it again. The bistro is quite a centered part in the whole story. It was easy to spot with its blue and white awnings and round wooden tables and chairs on the sidewalk. A few people were sipping coffee, all eyes on him when he made his way along the commons. Once his eyes adjusted to the inside of the bistro, he saw not one largish room, but two small rooms with a warm, crispy, dry clean that you requires. The chairs and tables were comfortable mishmash of materials. Sorry, I'm not holding it close enough. Are you all hearing okay? I hear it going in and out. I've got a big voice, but I'll keep it closer. At the back of this room, the cash register stood on a long wooden bar, jars of licorice pipes. That seems to be kind of a thing in there, is the licorice pipes, and twists, and cinnamon sticks, and bright gummy bears shared the counter with the small individual boxes of cereal. One of the things that Clara whispered, no, a few minutes later, genuinely shocked. In the 25 years she lived in Three Pines, she had never, ever heard of her crime. The only reason doors were locked was to prevent the neighbors from dropping off baskets of zucchini at harvest time. True. As the Gazette headlines made clear, there was another crop that equaled zucchini in the scope, marijuana, but those not involved tried to turn a blind eye. But beyond that, there was no crime, no break-ins, no vandalism, no assaults. Penny set this book, and I've been told others, in a special holiday or a special time of the year. And this, it goes on, was an uncomfortable, unremarkable early Thanksgiving with friends. Clara watched Jane make her way along the winding path through the woods that joined their two houses. Long after Jane had disappeared from view, her flashlight could be seen, a bright white light, like Diogenes. Only when Clara heard the eager barking of Jane's dog Lucy did she gently close her door. Jane was home, safe. This was the lull before the onslaught. Family and friends, invited or not, would arrive the next day and manage to stay through the Thanksgiving long weekend. The woods would be full of hikers and hunters, an unfortunate combination. The annual touch football game would be held in the village green on Saturday morning, followed by the harvest market in the afternoon, a last-ditch effort to download the tomatoes and zucchini. That evening, the bonfire would be lit, filling Three Pines with a delicious scent of burning leaves and wood and the suspicious undercurrents of gazpacho. Three Pines wasn't on any tourist map, being too far off any main or secondary road. Like Narnia, it was generally found unexpectedly and with a degree of surprise that such an elderly village should be hiding in this valley all along. Anyone fortunate enough to find it once usually found their way back, and Thanksgiving in early October was the perfect time. The weather was usually crisp and clear. The summer scents of old garden roses and phlox were replaced by the musky autumn smell of leaves burning, wood smoke, and roast turkey. Miss Penny wrote, I knew I needed to write a book that I would really enjoy writing, with characters I would choose as friends, and in a community I would choose to live in. That these usually were gentle folks settled in Three Pines was no accident. Some people who wander in clearly have another agenda, but most who find it are lost in some way, explains Penny. I think of Three Pines as a state of mind. It's a place that has chosen its society wisely. It becomes self-selecting, and there's a reason these people are there in this particular village. It's known grief and sorrow and will again. Yet there's something potentially redemptive here, because I believe in that. I think bad things do happen, but it's in an envelope of many blessings. But I was really meant this to be my ideal village, sit in my ideal geography. I think that in Three Pines is imbued with a kind of magical realism.
Yeah, so here's a sketch of Three Pines. And right in the center there of the picture is the Three Pines. Down at the bottom, you mentioned there's a road to Montreal. And I guess I kind of enjoy these books because I did a lot of business in Montreal and got familiar with some of the area around it. So it feels very familiar. And one of the books is in Paris, and I did a lot of business in Paris too when I was working and knew that area pretty well. So that really makes a difference when you're reading the books. And by the way, if anybody has any comments or questions or anything as we're talking, just go ahead and raise your hand and make sure, wave your hand wildly so we'll recognize it. So in the middle there, right next to the Three Pines, is the village green. The lady that was murdered, Jane, her house is there, on this side of the village green. The bistro, Gabriel and Olivier's bistro, is over there, kind of on the lower left-hand side. Peter and Clara, who come up a lot, their house is kind of on the middle there on the road to Montreal. And there's the schoolhouse on the right-hand side, and the church up there. We don't have it marked here, but above the village green, up there to the upper left-hand side, are the other stores, the grocery store and the bakery, and I forgot what the other ones were. So that gives you some kind of a sense of where the area is. It's a small area. It's kind of similar to my wife's hometown. My wife's hometown, the population of 10,000 when we got married, and it still has not that many people anymore.
Okay, and Klaus, when I was reading about this, this was a map that was
Yeah,
drawn. This
mine.
was a map that was drawn when a lot of people requested, a lot of people are trying to find Three Pines through the years. They're looking for this town. And so the editor constructed this map. Now, I don't think that's maybe as accurate as could be, and then the next picture kind of shows another colorized vision that kind of gives you a feel.
No, we don't have that one.
Oh, you don't, okay. I'm sorry. We did have one. It just was a colorized version that just kind of showed more the coziness of the town and the colors of the things that was used. But this was a request. People still haven't found where Three Pines really is. They think they know, but they're still looking.
Right.
But the town she lives in claims to Norton, is that the name of it?
The town she lives in sort of claims to be similar to Three Pines and has a lot of artists and doesn't, to me, my image of Three Pines and the pictures I've seen of Knowlton are nothing alike, but they do have festivals there and a lot of people go to the town that she lives in and they make hay with her name.
You saw the plot, and this is kind of a standard pattern, I guess, for all of Louise Penny's books. First off, you got to solve the murder. That's always the first priority. He's always, Gamache and Beauvoir and the assistants and proteges are always trying to figure out who done it. And that's in every single novel. But the more interesting part, I think, is, the human interactions. Gamache is training the proteges. His observations of human nature that he passes on, and we'll go through some examples of this, are priceless. It's really observations of human nature. Dealing with a crooked charade as well as the Canadian underworld. And they show up in this book, but they're not really strong in this book. In some of the later books, 2 or 3 books further on, it becomes a strong recurrent theme. Of course, eventually Gamache wins out. Eventually. But it takes a lot of books to get there. They have a lot of recurring themes of the crooks that are in the police and the Canadian police, and the crooks that are in the underworld and trying to get across the border. This is the border with Vermont. So it's just a lot of that. And then the interaction between Gamache and his deputy, Beauvoir, the suspects, the way he questions him is always fascinating. How he questions him, what questions he asks, what questions he doesn't ask. He says that. A lot of interaction with his wife. I'll go through some of these in a minute. The villagers, all the villagers have got secrets. They're always coming up with uncovering those secrets. And it's just fascinating how he uncovers them. And then the crooked thugs. The crooks are always there. They're always, show up in all kinds of different ways. But he didn't really think I'd tell you who did it. But everybody read the book, so you know who did it. So that's what I thought was interesting about Louise Penny's her writing style. She started off, as Joan told you, unsuccessfully writing history, and many of her mysteries educate the reader on different aspects of Canadian history and French history and some European history, which is really interesting, fascinating. And I guess I'm a skeptic. I don't ever believe anything like that, so I check most of those things out, and they're true. She intersperses her mysteries with unanticipated touches of humor. We'll go through some of these examples. Dawn's already mentioned some of them. If you're a speed reader, you're going to miss those. So I recommend that you try to read it. Read the book and look for the humor. And then she has lots of human insights as Gamache listens and assesses the suspects in the situation. You can actually figure out who done it in most of them, but it's also hard. You have to be really pay attention. So this is one of the first examples that I really think is funny. This is just a quote out of the book. Armand gets a call as he and his wife, Renee Marie, are on their way to her great niece's christening. After ending the call, Armand's immediate attention is required at a murder scene. Did you murder this person? Renee Marie, his wife, asked her husband when Armand told her he wouldn't be at the 2-hour service on hard benches in a strange church. The hard benches in a strange church kind of gives you a clue when he thinks about it. He says, if I did, I'll find out. Want to come? He replies. And her response then is, I'll just tell him you're drunk again, she said, when he asked if the family would be disappointed. You ever had your in-laws or your spouse tell you that your excuse for not going somewhere is you're going to be drunk again? So here's some of her humor. Chief Inspector Armand Gamache of the Surrey de Quebec knelt down, his knees cracking like the report of a hunter's rifle. My knees do that. So. The scent of mothballs, his grandmother's perfume, met him. My wife's mother and grandmother smelled like that. The only reason doors were locked in 3 Pines was to prevent neighbors from dropping off baskets of zucchini at harvest time. Dawn already mentioned that. I've got some friends on my street that drop off tomatoes. They have too many tomatoes. If Neanderthals had county fairs, this is what they'd have looked like. Described the county fair. Can you imagine a Neanderthal county fair? It could be raining mud and Peter would return home cleaner than when he went out. So a lot of her humor is in character development, where she explains what the people are like. They're all pretty funny. And this is with describing character development again. Myrna said she knew, who was a black bookkeeper, psychologist. She knew that singular expression when people saw her as furniture. It's kind of a wry humor, but you can also probably all know people that have been there and done that. I do. When Ruth ordered you into a conflagration, you went. She was scarier than any burning building. Described her very well. It says Gabri was like a Saint Bernard, though mostly without the slobber. Nicole knew with a creeping chill that in trying to impress him with her brilliance, she was having the opposite effect. She was proving herself to be a fool. Jane, this is late that got murdered. Jane was nice and all, but frankly she was ugly as sin, looked like a goat. I'd say if you're speed reading, you're going to miss some of these. She attempted to cross her fingers, but the nails kept knocking into each other, making it look like a finger puppet version of All-Star Wrestling. Beauvoir said, and here's an interaction, Beauvoir said, 2 elderly women dying within a few weeks of each other in a very small village. It's what you'd expect. If one hadn't died with a hole in her heart, said Nicole. He lined up his 4 squares of ravioli in a precise little road marching across his plate. Unfortunately, I do that, and my wife makes fun of me whenever I do it. Making a road again. He was bilingual and bicultural, equally deaf to both languages. We sang all the Christmas carols, But they were all to the tune of What Do You Do with a Drunken Sailor? Can you imagine singing Silent Night to What Do You Do with a Drunken Sailor? Okay, this is his wisdom and her humor. 4 statements he has in each book that lead to wisdom. Somebody told him this when he was a young inspector. He said, I don't know, I need help, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So early in this book, in Still Life, he states into his protege, Yvette Nicole, as I don't know, I need help, I'm sorry. And there's another one, I can't remember what it is. And she repeats those as the 4 things from then on, rather than I was wrong, so I can't remember. Probably the older version of Gamache will be, I can't remember, like us. So here's some of his wisdom. He did what he did best. He watched. He took in the people, their faces, their actions, and where possible, what they said. That was his job, to get people to reveal themselves. However well hidden and subtle, there was a sense that a murdered person had asked for it. That's why the shocked when someone they knew to be kind and good was a victim. There surely had been a mistake. I mean, how many times do we think that when somebody murdered? So, well, they probably asked for it. Few people understood that most premeditated murders were about rancid emotions, greed, jealousy, fear, all repressed. People don't see it coming because the murderer is a master of false front. There's a quote Gamache makes about himself. He says, I'm very good at observing, noticing things, listening, actively listening to what people are saying, their choice of words, their tone, what they aren't saying. And this is the key, it's choice. And that's true too, you can apply that to our lives. Homes were applied us to our lives too. Homes were a self-portrait. Every touch revealed the individual. God or the devil was in the details. And so was the human. So in future recurring themes in the other books from now on, use of 3 pines by the criminals. Criminals wound up using this little podunk town out in the middle of rural Canada, rural Quebec. Unincurred of corruption and its resolution within the charade, involvement and the guilt, and sometimes the innocence of some of the villagers. Those are surprising, and they go over several books. Wounds, physical and emotional, incurred by the main characters. And if you start in the middle of reading somewhere, some of the characters are going to have wounds and limps and other emotional problems that occurred in an earlier book. If you don't read them in order, you're going to miss that. And if you do read them in the order, you'll understand a lot more about it. Ruth's pet duck, making rhyming comments. And what the duck says rhymes with duck, so you can imagine that. You run around saying, duck, 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 or something that sounds very much like that. Now, Ruth doesn't have her pet duck in this book, but it's a theme in all the others. The new and the ongoing characters, both in the 3 Pines and the Charade. Gamache and his staff's progressive new assignments and eventual retirement. He eventually does retire in 3 Pines. And then the locale of other mysteries in Canada and France. Like I said earlier, she wanted to be a history writer, and she covers a lot of interesting history. So anybody have any thoughts or comments here that want to contribute?
I want to know how many of you wanted to murder Nicole. That very early in the book, I just got this huge hate for her when the local policeman has secured the scene, and he wants to learn and to watch the professionals and see what they're doing, and she gets jealous that Gamache seems to like him. And when Gamache's back is turned, she shakes his hand and thanks him for coming, basically to send him on his way. And such a just nasty, petty thing to do. And I thought, oh, I just don't like this woman. And she's bad throughout the book, but that to me just, later she says, oh, I'm nice, when she gives the offers the woman a glass of water that they're trying to be silent with and get her to confess something. But I just, that one little thing just to me said, you know, what a nasty piece of work. Did the rest of you hate her as much as I did?
Does she ever appear again?
Oh, yes.
Oh, she does, no?
Yes.
So she, oh, I missed.
Yes, she appeared.
Please don't give up on this book. When she said starts out so slow.
Yeah, we've had several conversations, it'd be nice to hear.
Yes, so Hot Rock, is that the Canadian Police Department?
Pardon?
Is there that's the Canadian Police Department?
Yes, the police department that he's with is the 4th largest in Canada, and they're in charge of rural areas. They're sort of like a sheriff that would cover like a quarter of the United States or something. He's sent out to all this rural crime, and
My comment is, even though she did a great description of Fair Day, I was dying to see the actual markings.
Description of what?
Let's say that again. Even though Louise did a great description of Fair Day, I really wanted to see the art piece.
Oh, yes, yes.
Fair Day.
Yes, I know. You have an image and you think, is this totally different? And at one point they say, how can we know these faces when they're just, you know, lines for eyes and mouth? But I think it was the paraphernalia that she surrounded them with or something that, you know, she gave them the character.
That's,
Yes, I would love to have seen what was really in her mind.
that's when I can endorse seeing the movie, because it did help for me to visualize some of this. And I read the book first and then just watch